Okay, we're live, and it's the Mac Reality Check Weekly, and we have a special guest named Giulio Vincent Gambuto. A couple of weeks ago, hi Giulio, and welcome.
Thanks
Maybe
for having
maybe a
me.
month or two ago, I was in a bookstore with my son, and I found your book, and I'm like, wow, this title talks to me. And then I started listening to the book, and I'm like, wow, everything he's saying is talking to me and talking to us in the Marketing Accountability Council. And you were gracious enough to answer my email and spend a few minutes with me on the phone last week. And we talked about, what led you to writing the book and some of your experiences. And I'd love to just start off with a easy question. What is the title of your book, and why did you write it?
Sure. So the title is Please Unsubscribe, Thanks. The original subtitle is How to Take Back Our Time, Attention, and Purpose in a World Designed to Bury Us in Bullshit. When the paperback came out, the publisher decided to make it a little bit more family friendly. And so it's How to Take Back Our Time, Attention, and Purpose in a Relentless World. Um, for both, though,
Wow.
the intention and the thesis are the same. So,
And
yeah,
tell us how you came to that. Like that's even if the desensitized title seems like a pretty clear point of view, right?
yeah. So the book really grew out of an essay that I wrote in 2020 called "Prepare for the Ultimate Gaslighting." It was an essay that I wrote on Medium in April of 2020. We were about 4 to 6 weeks, I think 4 weeks after the official declaration of the emergency. And, frankly, I wrote it for, I don't know, 50 or 100 people or so. I wasn't really, didn't have an understanding that it would really appeal to more than that.
Like
Um,
180,000 people at last. I saw the essay. It's a pretty significant amount of people like that essay.
oh, yeah, it went to 21 million readers.
Oh, 21
It
million
went,
readers. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, it
Something I
went,
saw.
That
yeah,
matters.
it
That's
went,
a lot.
it was around the world in 48 hours in 100 countries. It was very, very surreal. It's funny because some people are like, you should do that again. I'm like, I don't know how to do that again. Like,
Okay.
that's not something you wake up every day and are like, I'm going to do that again. It's, but the point of the essay was, maybe this is a moment for us as a culture and as a society to think deeply about what it is that we want to bring back after this moment, and sort of make normal again. And maybe this is an opportunity to sort of jettison the stuff that doesn't work and really just retain what is meaningful for us. Obviously, I didn't know what was coming. The summer of 2020 would then happen, and George Floyd would happen, and the protests would take over the world. Um, and so I think the entire world was waking up to the fact that maybe things are not going as well as they could be going. And maybe we should be making some big changes in the way that we do life and do business and do society. And the gaslighting part was really just about warning people that there would really kind of, what I thought at the time, and I was that there was going to be a concerted effort to kind of bring everybody back to normal.
Mm.
And look, I don't want to be silly. Like, people had mortgages to pay and rent to pay and kids to get to school. And so it really wasn't about saying that we should sort of live in some sort of fantasy land, but it was a cautionary note, if you will, to what I thought was a small group of people and turned out to be a large group of people. That maybe we should just be well aware of what's to come. And it's 5 years later, and nobody wants to talk about the pandemic. I don't either, but there are so many deep lessons from it that I think really apply to the world now. And so the book was an outgrowth of that, right? The book was sort of like my attempt to explain, first of all, like, where do we go from here? But also, if you want to look back and sort of connect the dots, how did we get to something like January 6th? How did we get to something where we all feel on the left and on the right that the ground beneath us is constantly shifting, and in a way that is not the regular kind of ups and downs of the American system or the American economy. So, I grew up in the 90s. I'm like about to be 50 in a few years. My childhood was sort of this roaring 90s Clinton era optimism and prosperity, and we were only going to rise ever. And then we graduated college and 9/11 happened, and it's just been one fight after another for 20 years. So the book is really an examination of two things. One, how did we get here? How did we get to this place where the world is relentless and we are seeing everything from the highest income inequality that we've seen in over 100 years, the highest wealth inequality. We're seeing skyrocketing numbers of mental illness. We're seeing these things that are not working. And then it was just kind of like an explanation or an exploration of what do we do about it. And my contention is always that we can do a lot individually, but it's really kind of corporate marketing that has convinced us all that these problems are individual problems that can be solved with individual solutions and individual products.
Well,
When in fact,
Jake has
it's
sent me.
quite.
I have access. I took the training from the Center for Humane Technology, thanks to Jake.
You did wonderful. Yes, I
Yes, and I'm
love
sure
their
you have
work is
too.
incredible.
Yeah, and what you just said, the externalities that are caused by these corporations cause a lot of damage to mental health, and then the corporations don't have to pay, don't have to clean it up, etc. And they are very real about the fact that these problems are not for individuals to solve. That totally validates everything you're saying. There has to be systems put in place, but now we're in a place where literally where taking away these things, it was bad enough if, as we were leading into this new administration of, we were actually fighting the fight with the FTC and all that stuff. And now it seems like the exact opposite is happening. And it seems like there's even more of a reason for you and your book and us and what we're trying to do with the Marketing Accountability Council.
I think so. I mean, I think the ground has shifted yet again, and unfortunately, we are two steps back, and now we're not even sort of fighting from where we were before. We're fighting from a place where quite intentionally the ground has been shifted below us, right? So I mean, even under Biden and under other presidents, the budget for the FTC is laughable, right? It is. I think it's something like $300 million a year, and I may be wrong about that, but it is that small, right? And so we have 300 million people in this country. That means we're spending $1 per person, kind of defending and aggregating the power of the consumer against corporations. That's laughable to me. I mean, it is a ridiculously low nominal kind of amount of money to be spending. I always go back to Adam Smith because I always, there's so, if you argue with if you argue with some of the folks that we are all very used to arguing with, I'll put it that way. It's very easy to sort of quote from Wealth of Nations and understand that this was kind of the Bible from which our economic system was crafted. But even Adam Smith said the government's role is to protect against abuse. And so this entire conversation about the size of government and its purpose is so un-American to me, because I think we're just supposed to accept the fact that government plays a role and needs to play a role, has to play a role, and it needs to be funded in order to play that role properly. And through Republican and Democratic administrations, it has been underfunded. It has not been funded well. So that's a small example, I think, of kind
Well,
of
it's a
like
small, yeah, but
what we all feel we're up against. But I think, you know, the Center for Humane Technology is incredible. But your point is well taken that these are communal, systemic issues that need to be approached from a communal, collective, systemic perspective. And when you have people in positions of power who don't even believe in the Constitution, you're 2 steps behind, maybe 10 steps behind where you even thought you were. You know.
Jake, what do you have to say?
Moni, what do you have to say?
You know, I got a lot to say. I mean, what? You'll learn this about me, Julio, if you ever come back to this, that my brain works in a way that is devil's advocate. It's counter. Even if I like agree with everything that you're saying, my brain just wants to poke at it. So one of the things that I want to poke at first is like this idea that we are in like unprecedented times and we've never experienced anything like this. And why I push back on that is because what's unprecedented now is just our access to media and information. We've had things have been catastrophic. It's just been funneled through 2 channels in a couple newspapers, right? So we can't look at everything. And now we have the ability to look at everything because there's a bunch of different mediums and a bunch of different voices and everybody poking at every little angle of it. And I think one of the things that is challenging about today is we are looking for the general public answer. Like, what's the majority say? Like, what's the collective's position on this? And we don't get that because there's so many voices. And right, I feel like that's the tension that maybe we are feeling here. It's not that we've never had anything like this before. We've been through catastrophic, it's human history, right? There's plenty of things that have happened before that were just horrific and terrible administrations and ridiculous things you've never seen before. It's just we didn't have 50 million people who had an opinion on it that we're hearing all at once, and we can't process all of that information.
I don't know that any of that is that either of us is countering the other. I think I agree with you fully. I mean, the reason this time is different is because everyone is CBS now, right? Like everyone has a channel through which they can express anything that they want. There are obvious benefits to it, from it to society. And there are obviously, you know, there's a problem, which is this cacophony of noise and just chaos. And some of that bubbles up and sort of becomes something in the real world, and some of it and most of it doesn't. So, you know, but that serves the purposes of the status quo, no matter what you're looking at, right? That served, you know.
It's hard to also then try to pinpoint when there's no like this is the general consensus, then it's hard to pinpoint what's the solution. I think that's also the issue, right? Because it's like when so many voices are happening, everyone has what they think is the right thing to do, right? So it's like, well, what's the consensus? We can't get to any kind of consensus, so we can't get to any agreement. Maybe it's a little bit of this, maybe it's a little bit of that, but it's like it's hard to bring it all together. And I feel like that's maybe part of what the future is to look like. It's to stop trying to mute the voices and try to bring somebody needs to have some collective of like, listen, we can have these voices, that's all good, but this has to be for the purpose of, instead of like contention, it has to be for the purpose of trying to find the solution here. That's super duper hard.
Just for the fun of poking back, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what representative democracy is?
That's why it's hard, right? Exactly. That's why everybody has a problem with it. And that's why it's slow and you know, bloated. And yes, exactly.
But I do think that like there's probably a world where we use not only technology, but where we use that multitude of voices to better effect than we've been using
sure.
it now.
Mm.
And
Exactly.
you know, I mean, if you think about, and I think about this a lot. I don't know why, but I just love I love history. But when you think
Same.
about what was the purpose of setting up our system this way, so much of it has to do with geography and the actual distance between Washington, D.C. and New Hampshire, Washington,
For
D.C.
sure.
and Montana, Washington, D.C. and
Mm.
Florida, right? And so the reason you needed a representative was because you could not physically be there, right?
Right.
And so there were other reasons. I don't want to be overly simplistic, but representative democracy was crafted, designed because of physical distance. And so
Right.
now that you have collapsed that and vanished
Mm.
that, and now that we have the internet and these technologies, which I don't think any of us is ungrateful for, they've done plenty to benefit society. But you have to look now at government and consensus and collective action and aligning on shared agreements, which is really just what public policy is.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to find a new way.
Yeah.
And I don't think we found it yet. I
No.
don't think we have found it yet. We're still in
No.
this phase of yelling at each other or even talking to each other, but everybody talking at the same. It's like everyone has the conch shell, right, from Lord of the Flies, and
Mm-hmm.
like everyone gets to talk. And when everyone gets to talk, no one gets to talk. So
Exactly.
Man. Wow.
All right, Jake. Go ahead.
Couple things. Man, so cool. Excellent book. What a title. They peeled it back.
Thanks, man.
What did it say originally? Because the title still has bullshit in it.
So the original title is How to Take Back Our Time. Please unsubscribe. Thanks. How to Take Back Our Time, Attention, and Purpose in a World Designed to Bury Us in Bullshit.
Oh, so then they peeled it back.
Look at that. My
They
son
did.
even looks.
Yeah, they did peel it back. And, you know, with my permission. It was a conversation that we all had about, you know, whether or not peeling it back would make it more universal. And you know, there was an argument to be made that everyone understands what the bullshit is, and everyone understands that word, and therefore that might make it universal. But I think there was just an effort, very well-intended effort, to just like clean it up a little bit. So.
Well, what's interesting is I'm looking at your experience, and you worked on movies and, like, you know, a bunch of writing projects, and you've been a part of mass produced things that were put out into a marketplace that is sort of like, it's meh, everybody's just meh, but you've constantly been in there, and yet we don't have consensus on those things, but we're still like cranking it out, and we're approaching it very cleared eye. But it seems like this political thing is not being approached in the same way and with the same aplomb and artistic skill that we put towards these crafts. Like this excellent book that you were talking about, you made decisions along this way to see if it's universally applied or this or that. Thinking about consensus as being the goal is missing the point, because there will there is never has been a consensus. But maybe, and then in this point, democracy is like, the real democracy is they did random, like back in the day, random people got to put a thing in there, and
totally.
then they were the ones that came. So it was literally a panoply of just a bunch of random fools, and they came up with way better ideas, way more imaginative policies than the people who are like vetted and sort of thoroughbred, sort of like a chicken doodle dog. And then, like, we made a perfect politician. And they're like, turns out they're corruptible. And you're like, oh God, why didn't we think about that?
It seems like you're talking about the Animal Farm days, which Gavin just read, right?
So, yeah, all of those different things that we can, you know, fly into. But that is a great example of someone taking a metaphorical marketing stance and taking some angle on this. And I think what you did was really like hit it on the head. and then say, here's what your personal, roles are. I want to learn more about that, because you said it has to change at the structural level, but we have to do something at the individual level. What is your advice on that stuff first? Because I feel like in the enacting of this, maybe we can make some of the policy decisions and talk about Adam Smith's invisible hand diddling us randomly. You know what I mean? And we've all been, hey, sorry. But do you know what I'm saying? So go into those personal
I
steps,
do.
because I'm interested in hearing that, and reclaiming our time. Like, what
Sure.
does it
Yeah.
mean when it's the same shit?
Well,
We're back to normal. 10 times
yeah.
step back.
Uh, I am absolutely want to talk about the practical end of this on the individual level. But first, I just want to make a note about what you said, that about what is consensus, and what this is not an original thought. I learned this from a leadership training years ago, but that there is a great difference between agreement and alignment. And I
Mm.
think we have convinced ourselves in the last 20 years, I think literally in the way that these systems have been designed and presented to us, that we are supposed to agree.
Mm-hmm.
We were never supposed to agree.
Mm-mm.
Democ- Democracy, there is no instrument in democracy. There is no mechanism in democracy for agreement. There
Have you
is a,
seen
Mm-mm.
it out here? Like,
yeah,
did you
there's
see
no
what you were
agreement.
doing?
No, but alignment is I can get on board and I can
Mm-hmm.
live
Which is what
live
we've
Mm-hmm.
with
had to
it.
fucking do at every step, and be like, well, I guess they're kind of fucking us artists again. Like, as a musician, like, as you're like, oh, I guess I don't get royalties anymore. Well, I guess truth don't matter no more. Well, I guess nobody wants a good brief anymore. Well, I guess nobody wants copy. Anyway.
um, well, that's a whole conversation, which I don't know that I agree nor align with.
No. Oh, well, we don't have to. So thankfully, there's no consensus
Yeah,
here. You are
yeah,
dismissed, sir.
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
But no, but
Back
like
to it.
look at no, but that's so interesting, because look at what how did we get there? We got
Mm.
there from a lack of unions among the creative class, right? We all sort of like, we all were working and giving our talents and giving our skills to larger corporations, but we were doing it individually. There was no amalgamation of that power, there was no unionizing of those roles. And now that it's happening in 2025 at the New Yorker, and at that Harper's Bazaar, or wherever the other one was, right? It's so shocking to the system.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, writers want to unionize. Creative people want collective bargaining. That's so shocking to people. In during the days of FDR and right after the war, I think the stat is that like 1 in every 3 Americans was in a union. Now it's like 1 in every 11 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a cultural shift that has happened, um,
Mm-hmm.
and the creative class has gotten shafted the most in it, or at least is one of the constituencies that's gotten shafted the most in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point, to your question. So the book looks at that conversation with respect to how to aggregate that power,
Mm-hmm.
but much of the book is is directed toward the individual for two reasons. One, I always call the book self-help, where self-help meets the system. So where we sort of have to understand how our own happiness is connected to the larger systems that we're a part of. And secondly, it's because I think we do have control over the level to which we are individually exploited by the system.
Mm.
I don't think I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that I don't think we have the power necessarily to turn that to zero, because we live here, and unless we plan on living somewhere else, I don't know that you ever escape that. Escape is a strong word. I don't know that you ever step out of that, but I do think that you can do certain things on a day-to-day basis that can turn down that volume. And I mean, like, quite literally, on the surface level, right? Like, do I need 5 subscription services for TV? Can I live with 2? Do I need to have 4 different music services? Can I live with 1? Do I need to have my money being taken out in $2.99 increments every time I go to my goddamn checking account? Or can I approach my subscription, my membership in these different parts of the system from a different perspective, right? So yeah, I'm like, my publisher was like, make sure there are takeaways, right? Yeah, there are takeaways for individuals to challenge yourself, to go outside and go to a lunch without a phone for an hour.
Well,
Challenge yourself.
talk
Yeah.
to me of like you had to come up with those things and you were like, holy shit, I already do these, or holy fuck, I got to start doing this. And then did you
Both.
start doing it, and then did you get some like feedback and
Yeah.
you're like, damn.
Yeah, both actually. So
Okay.
some of these things
Yeah,
I was
right.
already doing.
I'd imagine you're very intentional. I mean,
But it just kept feeding each other, right? It was like I had certain practices and day-to-day rituals that allowed me to step back from it all. And then now tasked with writing a book about it, I sort of leaned in more to these things and
Right.
and made
Had to.
sure. Yeah, so like one of them is like I got rid of my iPhone and I got what's called a jitterbug, which
This is
is
for the
like
senior citizens.
it's marketed to senior citizens.
Yeah.
It's like it has like large buttons, and it
Let's
only
go.
does 2 or 3
Jake has
things.
a dumb phone too.
I had a dumb phone for a year. It just broke, and I'm
Mine
heartbroken.
broke too. Yeah. And I kept
And
saying,
guess what I thought? The
dumb
minute it
phone,
broke, I
not
was like,
like
these motherfuckers want me back in the damn system. And then I was on this thing 2 hours when I got it back. Well, you
Oh, you
can't
got it
see
back.
it's
Now
my
I can
fucking
finally
phone.
text you, Jake,
Yeah.
without you having
Text me
to.
all the memes, whatever. You don't have to like email me like your grandma, but I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But if you go and get one of these phones, Julio, you're either a drug dealer or you're way past retirement.
Oh, like it is shocking to see what people's responses really were to that,
Wasn't
because
it great? I went through
people
the same
think,
thing.
yeah, people think you're nuts. And I'm like, I just prefer not to take the nonsense with me when I leave the house. That's all. Like, I come back to my computer, I'm totally plugged in, I'm at my laptop, I'm dealing with the world, things are pinging and ringing and dinging, even though I have really turned the volume down on a lot of those things.
Right.
But when I leave the office, I want to close this and I want to be out in the analog wild like some, natural creature.
Ew.
And I want to I want to talk to, people always laugh at me, but I make a point of knowing the name of all of the people who work in the neighborhood. It's very Mr. Rogers, but it's like, you know what? Phil is the dry cleaner and Debbie's the baker and so is, and it's a wonderful way to walk through your day. I'm not saying you need to walk through the world and like talk to people who don't want to be spoken to or impose your friendliness on everybody.
Right.
But that is the social fabric ultimately, right? This is social fabric, but this is also digital fabric.
Right.
But the actual social fabric outside is fraying so quickly that our heads are spinning, and the least we can do to reattach it and to kind of sew it back together is to say hello to each other and say please and thank you. I mean, I know I sound like my grandfather, but it's so basic.
It's
So
It's
basic.
true. As you talk, I can't help but think about Stolen Focus by Jonathan Hari and his book. I don't know if you know this guy, but I mean, the way he went about trying to wean himself off of this attention economy sounds like what you've done or are working hard to do. And there was a lot of humility in there where he was like, I went off he literally, I think he went for a summer to Cape Cod and didn't have any access to any of this stuff. And he talked very vividly about how hard it was for him to do so. I actually have I'm gonna, add another perspective. We now have a Gen Zer with us. Sorry to put you on the spot. You have your own blog, Gavin Mandel. How do you feel about this conversation?
That none of us are grandmas.
Okay.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Astute.
Yes, none of us are grandmas. Not only grandmas use that. I see some of my friends use those.
Oh, the
Well, it's
dumb
probably because of
phones.
a safety issue, because of the, not everyone, like you got an iPhone, but a lot of students, like if your sister younger than you were to get an iPhone, we would give her a jitterbug
Well,
too.
when I was younger, I used to see it more, but
Yeah.
not as much now.
But with regards to attention and the economy, you're with me all the time as we go to retail stores and interact with people. Is there anything about this conversation that's sort of interesting to you?
Like so people are just gonna think, I don't know why I've experienced this, but people will just ignore the fact that you know everyone's name and just basically become just become when for the low working citizens get will appreciate more, but the the for example, if it's like people don't appreciate the fact that people try to do all this stuff, and especially with the book, it's like they don't appreciate authors enough, which needs to happen more.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well,
Okay.
thanks, Gavin.
Thanks.
I like that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there we go. I
Well,
appreciate
but
that.
I think that does get to the point. Is like, pointing these things out. Something we're experiencing here, sort of meta. Lee, is like when you bring issues up, people are like, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. You personally took it upon yourself to make a statement at a structural level and publish it at the community. What was the individual response from the industry
Oh, such
to
a great question. Yeah.
your book? And then, like, that's just might kind of describe how the frosty reception and how, what Gavin's saying is people might not care that you take this stance, and they're like, actually, I can't help you. You're going here. I can't go with you. Is that kind of what it was?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. I mean, I had to kind of teach myself not to take so much of it personally, because there were a group of people that I never expected to support the book, meaning I just thought that their thinking was very different than mine, and therefore they were just never going to get on board. And I saw so many of those people just be emphatic about the book, like friends from college who I thought, whoa, we're not even closely politically aligned, not never mind socioeconomically, and they were like, those first 100 pages are everything I have thought for 20 years. And
Yes.
and then there were other people that I thought, oh, like, not to overgeneralize, but I was like, hey, you live in Brooklyn, you'll totally be on board with it. No, like people who, who were friends or friends of friends who sort of like, don't bring it up. Don't talk about the book. Don't talk about the thoughts in it. I think people were pretty surprised. This is my perception of
Right,
it,
right,
but
right.
I think people were surprised that I would take my first publishing opportunity to be that outspoken. I think people were expecting something much more smiley and much more people pleasing. That's kind of how I have led my life for a long time. And,
Right.
I think Pedro Pascal said a few weeks ago, like, I know how to get along with everyone. It doesn't mean I like everyone, right?
Agreement, alignment.
Yeah. And so I think like that's how I have really been in the world for 25 years of my adulthood. And so I think it was very shocking to people first when the essay came out and they realized, oh, he really is the son of a bus driver. He really does care about working class issues. and he's not afraid to talk about it. And then I think when the book came out, it was, just as much shock about kind of what I was willing to say. Again, this is my perception, and I live in my head all day long, so that might be very different than how people actually think. But that was my feeling. That was my feeling.
And this is what we talk about it all the time in the Mac, and I think what are the rewards and consequences of truth seeking? And by truth seeking, I'm talking about my truth. Like even in this world here, we regularly debate each other and leave as friends and have different points of view. And we're trying to form our unified, messaging and themes. But Jake and I and Moni and I and other people in this group, which circle, sometimes there are more people on these calls, but we regularly talk about the fact that what is the way that this, we could universally say that we agree enough that we're here every week because of our truth. We could agree enough that we write our stories and they are connected. And we talked about this on our first call. Like, I wonder what the future looks like for us and for people that we should be helping, but don't even know that they want or need help to get through this,
Yeah. And what does that look like? Because again, I say this all the time. My internal struggle as a marketer is doing what is ethical versus giving people what they want, which is part of my job. And what people want is cheap, fast, easy, dumbed down for the most part, microwave nonsense. And it's like, well, but I know you need this, but I know you want this. And like towing that line and that tension is what I ride all of the time. And I feel like that's a representation of sort of what we've all been talking about here is like, we know the quote unquote right things to do. I think we understand what the solutions could be and look like, but getting a majority of people or a group of people, or even like 4 people on board to do it at the same time is a very difficult thing to do.
Oh, that was beautiful. I just wanted to basically say what you just said.
What's the answer, Julio?
Let's go. Here's, I'm gonna go off on a tangent. Happiness industry, Julio. I put this on the chat. This is a book that goes into like the history of manufactured happiness, and just like what you're saying is like it's possible for us to be happy while we're being eaten by the machine. I totally fucking agree with you. I don't think we have another choice, but I also think the reason why we're here is not because we have truth. It's because we're outside of the clubhouse. They won't let us in there, I tell you. And I've been inside the clubhouse a little bit, and I was like, fuck these guys, I'm out of here. So the point is, I think we're just like, I'm not into talking about your shit and believing in your fake shit in the way you want it. You need to have something that represents everybody and also ground truth. I don't care if you care about the fucking issues of the working man. You're going to eventually come back down to earth. And what you said, Moni, was these people want quick tactics. Do they? These people want fast food. Do they? These people want cage fights with midgets. You're like, I don't know. And they're like, but that's what they're looking at. And you're like, somehow we got so goofed up by saying, I'm just giving them what they want. And then other people are like, and you said another thing, Moni, is they might not know what they want and what is good. And so that is like where we're slowly edging into this world. And then the back to normal thing about COVID, like, man, it is like that. There's just so many things that I want to talk to. Oh, and about Adam Smith. The Chicago school changed. In the original Adam Smith, he mentioned that you're supposed to give a fuck about the public welfare, that you're supposed to totally care about everybody with all this money. And the Chicago school in the 50s took that part out. They just King James
I didn't know
that because when you said that's our Bible, guess what they did to the fucking Bible? King James was like, there's some shit in here that's questionable. This Jesus man, he sounds like he's like a little bit too open to shit. can we make him sound like a fucking asshole? And they're like, maybe yes. Let's put some more guy shit in there. And the King James Bible is the Bible that the Bible before that, and the Gnostic Gospels, like, man, we have messed history up again and again and again on behalf of what? For some kind of industrial approach to things. And I don't think capitalism is bad, because I really like it. Look at this. Look at this cool like video conference call we're on. We get to talk about marketing. We are lucky little ducks. But I think, Julia, like what we should do is like, is your book still slapping, or is now the time for us to like put this book up on blast, or is now the more unprecedented time where we have to do we have to write a new book?
Well, go for it. I don't think any author is going to tell you not to put their book on blast. Yeah, the book's been out. So the hardcover came out in 2023. The paperback came out in 2024. It was a Barnes & Noble.
Relatively new. I mean,
it's all new.
Great. People need this mother.
Yeah, and it's on the table at Barnes & Noble right now. So it's it's right there on the front, and it was a pick of the month in 2024, and they've been doing it's selling very well, and I get emails all the time from people who have read it and who are reaching out to say it's actually quite the same as not exactly the same, but it's quite the same as the essay. Like, certain people are emailing to say thank you, and certain people are emailing to say fuck you. And so there's it pushes a lot of buttons. And back to your point earlier, about how people have responded. Right. I used to be a stage performer before film school.
Yeah, I love all this.
Thank you. And I did a lot of personal storytelling. And I talked a lot about my parents. My parents are New Yorkers through and through. I grew up on Staten Island in New York City. My dad sounds like Tony Soprano, minus the mafia. They are beautiful, incredible people that in my 20s I thought were very funny to put on stage. And I would love to do that. That's just more fun, right? I don't think any of us is looking to spend their time angry and furious. But when the pandemic happened, I became angry and furious, and it was. I hope that it's with grace and with some sort of elegance, but it is really infuriating to me the way that our system handled that tragedy and continues to handle the aftermath of it. I told Jay on our first call that the impetus for the essay originally was an email from J. Crew, because they had been emailing like every other retailer and brand in the country as soon as the emergent. Yeah, we're in this together, right? There were emails that were like, "This is how you wash your hands, America. Left, right, soap, water." Right? Like, we're in this with. I was
marketing through COVID. I was doing the same. I was like, should we go virtual conferences? Is that the future? Yeah. There are no conferences ever again. Turns out.
And 4 weeks later, right, J. Crew was sending emails to buy a turtleneck sweater for $350 as the crisis worsened. Now, is there a level of grace and forgiveness that we all have to have about how any of us behaved in that moment?
Yeah, we're all kind of wild.
But it was very illuminating with respect to how the system was going to handle a very dark time. And it was unnerving to me. My brother-in-law worked for Coca-Cola at the time, and he was a driver. And Coca-Cola had all over their website photos of people in masks. All of their messaging was about how much they were doing to protect everyone. And their drivers were going to work every day, demanded that they were going to work every day, and were not given a single piece of PPE.
Oh, God.
So imagine the terror on that my sister experienced, that her husband was leaving the house every day, going to every deli and bodega in New York City to deliver Coca-Cola because somehow Americans needed Coca-Cola to feel normal. I mean, let that sink in for a second. And they were doing that excuse me, and he was doing that every day for the first 6 weeks of the pandemic, which now looking back, you're like, oh, he's fine. At the time, when we
No,
didn't know what was going on,
had no
that was
idea.
a very dangerous thing to be doing. And so I bring it up only to say that that was really the first moment that I personally started to kind of really understand this great disconnect between what we're saying publicly and what we're actually doing. I don't want to appear super naive. I just sort of lived in a bubble before where I just thought that, like, I have trust in the system. I have trust that these things are being done with some sense of goodwill. That's
No.
not the case.
Well, if
And
you look at,
so,
sorry, but if you look
no,
at like what's going on, like with Target boycotts, Walmart boycotts, all these kinds of boycotts. I heard something about Coca-Cola also getting in trouble when there were some border issues with some of their employees. The fact is that in this hyper-connected world, when companies make these selfish decisions, people will hear about it and people will latch on. And now, I've been reading about this Pastor Bryant's boycott of Target is significant, and it's quantifiable, and it's making a significant shift in how that company is operating and who's shopping there. Same goes,
yeah,
it's happened with Kellogg's, when the guy went online, I think as people were having trouble
Oh, eat
making
more
ends
cereal
meet.
for dinner.
Yeah, he says have cereal for dinner, and people are like, screw that, I'm not doing that.
Was that? And then did I do it wrong? Did I do it wrong? And they're like, no, I guess you're okay. And then the Boeing guy, he's like, the planes are going down. He's like, did I do it wrong? And they're like, no, I think you're okay. And they're like, everyone's like getting a pass. But that's what I'm saying. Historically, it's interesting because I had my mind open when I was naive enough to think Facebook was going to do something and make the
yeah,
right call. Like after 2016, 2014, I was like, something's bubbling over here. 2016, I was like, man, I hope they did capitulate. They did do some things, but then they walked that back. And then that's when I was like, oh man, whatever we're thinking is happening is not.
When you said walk that back, are you talking about when he said
He
that
went in
he's
front
getting
of the
rid of
Senate and was
moderation
like,
at the beginning
y'all,
of the Trump
we missed
administration?
this. Yeah, we missed this. There's an election meddling thing. We're going to focus in on this. These were the things that we did. Sheryl Sandberg was there at the time. We kind of let some people buy some data and and they're like, we're going to do better. But then, for like years later, he's like, we need more big dick energy on this platform. And you're like, I don't know. The
well,
shares
that
are going up.
the
What is
I'm reading,
real?
Jake. I'm reading Careless People.
I don't want to
It's
read it because it's just going to be like,
whew, it's fantastic, and I don't think there will be anything in it that surprises you, but it's really kind of incredible. I mean, that's a whole other level of outspokenness. That is pure whistleblowing, and it is beautiful
And
to
at the
read.
global scale, knowing that the Myanmar thing, knowing that there's a connection to these like, oh, ah. So it's like if you really pay attention, it's so whack.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like I could see. I'm interested to hear the people that you don't consider yourself politically aligned with. They really loved your book. What did they love about it?
So I'll give you an example of a friend who I mean, he works in banking and investment, and he has for 20 years. I thought he would kind of just give me a pat on the back and say, "That's cute that you wrote a book. Good for you."
As he
And
passes you on a jet ski.
yeah, I just thought, they live in a very affluent neighborhood. They're wonderful people, but I did not expect the kind of support that I got. And And he called me up and he was like, whoa, this book. And I asked him point blank, I just said, like, I got to tell you, I wasn't expecting that to be your response, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, well, and I asked him, when did you start to kind of question the way that the system was working and whom it was benefiting and where we were at? Like, how did you go from where you were in college to where you seem to be now? And he said, 0809. He said,
Mm.
Oh wait,
Wow.
oh
he
nine.
said,
That was the year, bro.
he
That was a
said,
big one.
yeah, he said,
Big
watching
shit.
people get off scot-free
Yeah.
for all that happened in that
Huge.
crisis was life-changing for him. He still very much, you know, professionally and socially is, you know, in circles that are quite wealthy. But he said to know that there were people in leagues far above
Mhm.
him. I hate using
Light
up and
years.
down
No,
analogies,
it's
right? But
fine.
like
Yeah.
That's about
above,
right.
so in these leagues socioeconomically that were so wealthy, get off scot-free in the way that they did, he was appalled. And so he very much started to think differently. And so
Wow.
I was fascinated by that.
Right.
I thought, you know, I certainly knew where I was at in my kind of journey of understanding all of this in
Mhm.
08, 09. But he was just like, we got fucked. And therefore, there was plenty of people who didn't. And those are the people who perpetrated much of what went wrong.
It,
And therefore, he found, you know,
People
that
want to study 2020, study 08.
I
Yes.
was
That was
just
really, bro,
it
that
was
changed
huge.
a lot.
And do you know what? I was in a conversation the other day, and a lot of the energy for crypto and a lot of
Mhm.
that comes from the disaffected of 08, 09.
Oh,
They're
Bitcoin blew
saying
up. What?
we can't believe in the banks. And these are really sensible people that you wouldn't think that are going into these like weird pockets. And I was like, man, they're trying to get you to use your energy and your frustration for this or that. And this is what we can do for private marketing. And I could sell this person a granola bar and this person this, but they're going to sell this truth and that. So it's like, man, we got to like get a handle on that.
It
And
broke down the institutions. Like once you take away the belief and trust in it, starts to crumble. It's been crumbling since 08.
and
And
and then and then to Moni's point, it's like, well, it could be back to the 80s, it could be back to the Monica Lewinsky, it could be back to the 70s, actually the 1670s, actually the 1870s. You're just like, so many manipulation ruptures in trust, and the people who are holding the line, you either look like a fool or I'm your biggest fan because I want to hold this thing together too. That's where I'm thinking, like, we're ripping it apart. Maybe if we stop, we realize we're holding it together. Oh, put that in a screenplay, Julio.
I
Okay,
gotta
it
jump,
is.
guys, but this has been great. Thank you so
Moni, thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Of course.
But
Same
that is,
here.
it
I have to go.
no,
But
don't go.
I'm
Isn't
so
it? Okay, go.
no, only because I have another commitment. But I'm so happy to talk to you
We
all.
have
This
to be
was really
friends because I
wonderful.
feel like
So
I looked in a mirror when I was like, oh, he got a dumb phone. Oh my God. He's like pissed out. He's really nice, but he wrote a fucking book that was scorching people. I was like, let's hang out with this dude. I love being on stage. I'm a musician. Like, I'm all in favor of this
nice,
music stuff. We can talk about
nice.
that. Let's connect online, man. Jay,
Okay,
great. It wasn't an interview, but you did good.
it was
This
great.
is all
I loved
good.
it.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks for
man.
coming and
You're
enjoy your
welcome. Yeah.
weekend.
All right, we'll be in touch. Thanks so much. Be well,
All
guys.
right, man.
Bye-bye.
Later. All right, that's it.
I just